Welcome to today's episode, the show where we talk about the most recent installment of a different series every show. Today we're talking about Manhunt, Apple TV's latest. It came out March 15th, 2 episodes based on the book by James L. Swanson that was released in 2006-2007. This is a Civil War drama highlighting the manhunt that took place after Lincoln was assassinated by John Wilkes Booth. We're going to break into it, but first I wanted to ask you a question. You, at one point, had memorized all the presidents of the United States as well as the state capitals, yes?
Yeah, that was around 8th grade in like 2013.
Was it like a school project or something?
I remember in 5th grade, there was a question on all 50 capitals. That was a test that we had to take, but it was just something that I was kind of interested in. In fact, whenever it comes to history questions, I really am only good at kind of presidential questions because of what I know.
How far do you think you could make it down the line at this point?
Probably to Abraham Lincoln.
Through Abraham Lincoln? Go for it. Let's just see where you can get to.
George Washington, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, James Monroe, John Quincy Adams, Andrew Jackson, Marvin Van Buren, William Henry Harrison, John Tyler, James K. Polk, Zachary Taylor, Miller Fillmore, Franklin Pierce, James Buchanan, Abraham Lincoln, Andrew Johnson, Ulysses S. Grant, Rutherford B. Hayes. I think Grover Cleveland is somewhere there. You're skipping a couple, and then Benjamin Harrison in between. William Howard Taft is there too. That's kind of where it becomes a little fuzzy for me.
Yeah, well, we only have to focus in between Abraham Lincoln and Ulysses S. Grant because, well, Grant's not even in the show yet, but I do remember him from the book. I read the book quite some time ago, back when it actually was released. You read it with this show coming out.
Yes.
How far did you make it in the book?
About halfway through.
Okay, and did we, in 2 episodes, get to the halfway mark?
Yes. In fact, I actually had to read a little bit more because at the very end of the first episode, which I would say is probably around 130 pages in, even though they do switch around
they're flipping
frames.
My favorite part of the book starts this show.
Yes.
And they don't even show it to its full potential.
It was also my favorite part. It's the part with Lewis Powell attempting to assassinate Secretary of State Bill Seward, right?
So most people who aren't aficionados of history might think that Lincoln was the one guy that they were trying to kill, the Confederacy, even though they had already submitted to the North, that these random agents had been sent out there to try to kill the president. But they were also going for the VP and they were also going for the Secretary of State.
They were going for Andrew Johnson. George Atzerodt was the person that was hired to take him out. But something that people also might not know is that this wasn't the first time that John Wilkes Booth tried this. There was a famous time, I think, a couple months prior, where he hired a bunch more people, not just Lewis Powell and George Atzerodt. He had dozens of people waiting to kidnap.
Kidnap as opposed to kill, right?
Yeah, Abraham Lincoln, when the carriage was supposed to come by, but it was almost like one of those movie scenes where they kept waiting the whole entire night and the carriage never came by. Abraham Lincoln decided not to go wherever it was that he was supposed to.
Now that you say that, it does sound familiar. The part that they start off the show with, though, is where where this guy goes in to attack the Secretary of State, right?
Yes.
And describe how that works in the book.
So in the book, what he does is there's a good 5-page buildup where he is arguing with Bell. Bell is someone that works for the Secretary of State. He's an African-American man on the first floor.
I think we see him, right?
Yes, we do. But it's not like it is in the show because he argues with him, and finally Bell decides to let him in because Lewis Powell is acting like he is a doctor. He doesn't just say, I have medicine for him. He's like, I'm a doctor. I can help you with this.
Yeah, in the show, he says that he showed him a prescription, either bottle or a prescription itself.
Right, but what happens in the show is he stabs Bell right as he gets in there. That's not what happens. He's able to make his way up the stairs.
He finesses his way up.
And it's only when the daughter of Secretary of State kind of reveals that the Secretary of State is in the other room that he starts just slicing everyone. In fact, the most memorable part of the story to me is when he gets on top of Bill Seward in the book and he starts violently trying to stab his knife and kill the Secretary of State.
It's my favorite part is because of how he fails so spectacularly.
Yes, it's he does a ton of stabs and it's in the dark. That's the reason why he's not being able to succeed. But he kept on trying to stab him and couldn't.
I feel like you could give a toddler a big old knife and send them into a room, and if they just stab, they could probably hit something.
Well,
that would be
Bill
a vital
Seward,
artery.
the more crazy part is Bill Seward is bedbound at this point. This guy is an old man. He's injured. He's having to be in bed, and somehow Lewis Powell is failing even at that. And then, he just gets off of the bed and starts stabbing everyone he possibly can. But like we see in the show, this part was right. David Harold kind of decided to leave, did not give Lewis Powell his way out. out.
And he just like walks out. He doesn't even run or
Yeah.
anything, right? And I also remember that with the Andrew Johnson plot, that guy just chickens out completely.
Yeah, and they don't even show his face in the show. We hear about George Astaroth. Actually, we do see him for one scene, but he's in the show a lot less than he even is in the book. One thing about the Secretary of State assassination, though, is at least in the book, it's after Abraham Lincoln's assassination.
Now, in the book, once the president had been assassinated, was so much suspicion actually cast on Andrew Johnson?
There were a lot of conspiracy theories, and there was a couple different ones, but yeah, I believe that Andrew Johnson
I had not remembered that part of it. I did remember that they portrayed his wife as like undiagnosed, either bipolar or a bit crazy, but none of that has ever been confirmed. Just as John Wilkes Booth's final line as he jumps off from the ledge there and breaks his leg has not been confirmed whether or not he actually said the full Sic Semper Tyrannis or just Sic Semper, because he himself, I think, it confirmed that he only said Sic Semper, but enough people heard Sic Semper Tyrannis that is what history has put down.
Well, in the book, I think the Lincoln's assassination is probably the most faithful to its source material in the show, because he did time his shot. I'm talking about John Wilkes Booth. He was in bars and he was spouting off a ton of things about white supremacy. He also was a ladies' man. The show or the book tells you that straight out. There was apparently a ton of girls that were fawning over him. They don't show that. But going back to Lincoln's assassination, yeah, he did fire the bullet. The bullet did not go through Lincoln's brain, which is why Lincoln was still alive for the next couple hours. And then he did jump off the stage.
Sorry, what did you say about not going through his full brain?
It didn't. Yeah, the bullet
didn't
stopped.
exit?
Yeah, it didn't exit.
Yes, but it did go through both lobes or like both sides of his brain.
He wasn't going to make it out alive.
And the question is whether or not with modern day medicine, do you think he would have made it?
I don't
and the
think
answer
so.
is probably not. And even if he did, he would be a vegetable, because yes, once it like went through both sides of his head as opposed to just sticking in one lobe or something, like that would not make him, he wouldn't be able to talk.
Also, right before the bullet happened, right before John Wilkes Booth fired the bullet, it was Abraham Lincoln was looking at the stage, kind of bending over the ramp, trying to see what was going on. Apparently, had he turned his head just the littlest tiny bit, he probably would have survived.
And I remember that John Wilkes Booth, I think it was like his inner monologue that the guy wrote up for him or something. Like he was afraid because this guy was like only 55 years old. And he, even in the show, they show him as kind of skinny with Hamish Linklater, but apparently he was like pretty strong.
And I think he only had one bullet because he wanted to do this like right.
Yeah. Later on, we see the investigator find the other bullet that fit the gun. And also it's a tiny gun, so it's not going to carry many rounds.
But right after John Wilkes Booth fires his shot, he does slice Henry Rathbone, his arm. And it's said that because Henry Rathbone, who was far down on a list of people that the Abraham Lincolns or the Lincolns wanted to actually invite to the show, just a ton of other people started passing on it. Because he had a soldier's background, he was actually able to survive. It even says in the book, had he not had a soldier's background, possibly another person would have died that night.
They even show in the second episode that Lincoln invited Edwin Stanton, the guy leading the investigation, the Secretary of War, to the play at that time, and he decided to not go. Some people have said that was because of Mary Lincoln and Mary Todd Lincoln and how difficult she was to be around, and that's the guess as to why they weren't there. The other thing that I recall now that you say it was that Henry Rathbone, like his life afterwards, because he was an officer, he was a lawyer, he tried to defend Lincoln.
Right.
But afterwards, like many years later, he killed his wife and then ended up in an asylum for the rest of his life.
That's crazy. In the book, he's
think
like,
it's like PTSD related, but I'm not sure. But it's crazy when you look at their Wikipedia pages, because you have to imagine all the people who have played these characters just with way bigger beards. Everybody should have had a way bigger beard for this, and it would not have been a joke, because that is how they lived their lives back then.
One thing was after Lincoln died, and the book has like 80 pages of this, because the assassination happens around page 50, but it's really 130 pages in when Lincoln...
Do you think it was smart?
It's pronounced that. No, I didn't, because I actually liked hearing about it. What was such a big problem was once the play ended, once everyone started running out there, because even some people were wondering
they still thought it was part of the play.
If it was part of the play or not, was how they were going to get Abraham Lincoln's body out of there. And I think it's Charles Leal, who I'm not even sure if we see in the show, but he is such an integral part of getting Lincoln's body to a nearby house that was there.
And then the main doctor was also kind of a big deal in the books too, right?
Right, yeah.
We don't see him too much either. No, I think why they they changed it and they just made it about more the manhunt itself is because that is the title of the show. And they really said, let's kick out what everybody is expecting already. Let's show them what they want to see. And then for the rest of the episodes, really delving into the story that no one is aware of unless they've read
what happened afterwards. And that's where John Wilkes Booth, this is also from the book, he does ride, and they had closed down the bridge that he needs to get through, but one of the security guards did recognize him and he's allowed to go.
But it's not determined whether or not the security guard who recognized him actually, like his wife recognized him. But that, I think, it went to what you were talking about with girls liking Booth.
Even after he assassinated the president, there were still people that were like in love with him, which is crazy.
No, that's actually not crazy, because remember the Boston bomber from a few years ago? Like, they put that Rolling Stones article or whatever article about him out there, and there was a ton of girls that became fans of his. It's crazy how people attach themselves. It's also nuts how many people, like the person playing John Wilkes Booth, Anthony Boyle.
Anthony Boyle, yeah.
Rising star for Apple, was also in, of course,
Masters of Air. I think
Air.
He was the best part of the show. I
Harry
think it's
Potter.
John Wilkes Booth.
Oh,
yeah.
okay. Yeah. No, but he's 29.
Yeah, and
3
John
years old.
was 26.
He's 3 years older than Booth was. It's crazy how young a lot of these people who do these assassinations end up being in history. Like the guy who shot Kennedy, the guy who shot Franz Ferdinand, right? Like, I don't even think that guy was 20 years old. But yeah, if I told you some names of like actors, because John Wilkes Booth was an actor, let me see if you can get
and
whether or
not
not
only was he an actor, his family was an actor. His dad was a famous actor,
but
so
they
was
were
his
more
brother.
famous than him.
Yes.
I'm trying to put in comparison, like, what an actor today, when you think of a 26-year-old committing one of the biggest crimes in all of history, like what that would look like.
Right.
Do you think that Chandler Riggs is older or younger than John Wilkes Booth?
Oh, Chandler Riggs is younger than John
He is,
Wilkes Booth.
but by just a little bit.
Yeah.
That was a little Phineas.
Phineas?
Phineas the singer. What's her face?
Oh, older?
Same age.
Same age. Wow.
Asa Butterfield.
Asa Butterfield.
Could he be the next murderer?
No, he's older, right?
Yeah. No. He's the same age, but he's also British.
Oh, yeah.
Maisie Williams.
Maisie Williams.
Yes.
I'll just say yes, same age.
Same age.
Yeah.
And Jake Paul?
Jake Paul, younger, right?
No, he's 27. So
27?
he's older than so he's older than John Wilkes Booth ever lived to be. Crazy. So yeah, I also want to highlight how similar it seems that this show is to Masters of the Air. One is a Civil War drama. They're both on Apple, first of all.
Yeah.
One is a Civil War drama versus a World War II drama. They're both miniseries. Both are based on 2006 bestsellers where the titles have been abbreviated. Manhunt is not the full title of that 2006 book,
It's like
right?
It's
the
the
12-day
chase
chase
for
for
Lincoln's Killer.
And it's funny because you also have The Killing of Lincoln or whatever that Bill O'Reilly
Right,
wrote.
yeah.
There's like a bunch of Lincoln books out there. And then Masters of Air, its full title was America's Bomber Boys Who Fought the Air War Against Nazi Germany. So both of them were adapted this year after that being made the same year. Both star Anthony Boyle, like we talked about, who was also in The Plot Against America, which was the show that was about Nazi Germany as well, but like from the creator of The Wire.
Right, yeah.
As well as some people have compared Hamish Linklater, I've compared his portrayal, his voice at least, as paying homage to Dana Carvey's impression of George Bailey from It's a Wonderful Life, played by Jimmy Stewart. And Jimmy Stewart, in turn, if you remember, was featured in Masters of the Air as he flew more than like 20 combat missions.
Hamish Linklater, he is unrecognizable as Lincoln.
He is, and he's gotten some backlash with his portrayal because of his voice. But that is a well-known fact that Lincoln had a goofy voice, like a goofy, high Mickey Mouse type voice, soft-spoken.
When he
at certain
first
points.
started speaking in the episode, I did start laughing.
Yes, it took you out of it, but then I think the second episode, he wins a lot of people over because that comic element that he brings to Lincoln, who is in a good mood. He had just won a freaking war.
Also,
I think,
Lincoln, he's known to be a jokester. He was always a jokester. They did in the Daniel Day-Lewis film. He always told jokes.
It's just funny trying to think of Daniel Day-Lewis doing jokes. I've just seen There Will Be Blood the second time, and it just does not seem like that character. And then also Tom Hanks. Like I said, the Killing Lincoln book.
Right.
It was adapted in 2013, and Tom Hanks did the the voice for
Sorry,
it,
let me get
the narration for
Wait,
it.
so Killing Lincoln, is that the Bill O'Reilly book?
Yes.
And Tom Hanks,
Yes.
a well-known liberal, did the reading for
I don't know
it?
about their political beliefs. I think Bill O'Reilly's book itself was highly regarded, though, as being historically accurate. And then also Tom Hanks has shown that he enjoys doing any sort of trivia because he was part of Taylor Sheridan's 1883.
Right.
He also played a Union general in that. And then the director of the first 2 episodes here, Carl Franklin, also directed the 5th episode of The Pacific. Yes, it's not Masters of the Air, but still related. Most recently, he's also done the Jeffrey Dahmer story, Mindhunter, and I Am the Night, all featuring serial killers and their mindset. So I can see why they chose this guy to kind of focus on John Wilkes Booth. However, one of my big surprises for for these 2 episodes was that he felt like a secondary character. It really was the Tobias Menzies show.
Yes, Edwin Stanton, I felt like, took over some of Charles Leal's scenes in the book, but also he's not the only one that gets more
Who's
time.
Charles Leal's?
Charles Leal was the doctor that was with Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah.
But people who get more time in the show than the book are people like Andrew Johnson, Mary Sims, the former slave who was there with Mudd. That whole backstory is not in the book at all.
So that is my main con, and I'm sorry to say that, but it did feel like a here we go again moment because the showrunner themselves said that this is a complex, full of history. Like whenever you're doing that, you're going to have to take artistic liberty.
Right.
Yes. But they added the Mary Sims plot line. Like they added a ton of scenes where it showed backflashes, but they weren't good backflashes, adding a lot of context and cool stuff. It was like the most cliche slave storyline that we've seen in everything beforehand.
Exactly.
And Mary Sims had left Mugg's operation. Like I don't know if she had been sold at that time or gained her freedom, but she had moved on. She did testify against him, but she wasn't there.
And that's trial. No, I know.
That's insane that they would just be like, okay, we're just going to add a full character when there are so many that they're weeding out who were actually there.
It was one of my biggest problems. I also had a huge problem with what Mudd said at the very end. First off, he learns in history when he goes into town, when John Wilkes Booth is still at his house. That's how he learns about Abraham Lincoln and the assassination. And it's crazy that John Wilkes Booth was able to fall into that luck because Mudd decides not to tell anyone about it because he wasn't a big fan of Lincoln himself.
Yeah.
But David Harold learns about it. He's like, we have to get out of here now. And Booth says, no, I'm going to wait for Mudd to come back. Instead, it's just he learns about it from the paper, but he didn't even know who John Wilkes Booth was or recognizes him. Yet at the very end of this 2nd episode, he says, so the plans changed when I think George Atzerodt comes to visit.
Yeah.
I was like, wait. That is completely changing history. So yeah, that and Mary Sims added backstory were my biggest.
The Mudd storyline for throughout history has been also contested a little bit. Like his family has tried to prove his innocence over time, but there are fair indicators that says yes, he was very open to the Confederacy and their ideas and notions. And
even
stuff.
The book says that he could have been like America's hero had he just told people in town that John Wilkes Booth was at his house.
Or if instead of straightening the guy's leg, because that's why Booth was there, was just because his leg was broken, he had just snapped it in half, really done a number on it, and then been like, I killed him. I got revenge.
Well, Mudd being so, I guess, with John Wilkes Booth because he did have a lot of charm to him. He was even able to charm Mudd's wife into kind of, not to like.
No, I'm not saying that.
Yeah, but he was even like, yeah, I won't tell anyone about you coming over if you leave right now. But I just didn't like the way that it was portrayed in the show. It seemed like it was
the
just
show seems
history.
more tasked on trying to show Edwin Stanton's full. How do you think his performance was?
I thought the performance was fine, but I was more interested in what was happening with Anthony Boyle and John Wilkes Booth. That storyline. It felt like Edwin Stanton, right after Abraham Lincoln is pronounced dead, that story did not move at all, even going into the 2nd episode. Like the train thing where they brought Lincoln's body on, yes, that does happen. But it seemed like at least when the book got to kind of the slow parts, it was jam-packed with information. You were learning about it. Here it didn't seem that way.
Blueprints and ciphers and evil landladies, and I did like seeing the landlady get some justice for when they found out that she was evil, right, and that she wasn't able to get away with it.
I did like Lewis Powell's scene, yeah, where he gets gets caught at the beginning of episode 2.
Sure. And then he, so in such a dumb way, yes.
Yeah.
It really showed how this thing was just kind of like haphazardly put together. Patton Oswalt has been said in this show to be a little bit too modern in his, like some of his mannerisms, some of the dialogue they've used with him.
Yeah.
People have said it's more like seeing someone of a 2000s cop than it is seeing anyone in the 1800s.
There's a lot more comedians than I expected because Matt Walsh plays even Mudd.
And even Hamish Linklater.
That's what I was going to mention next.
Yeah. My favorite line for a pro for the show, they do a little anachronistic dialogue. They throw in that one about I could go outside and shoot someone, which is obviously a reference to Trump. But they also did the one about January 6th, about the insurrection, about like, we elect our presidents with the people's votes versus by coups. And I like that one. I think Tobias Menzies deserves the credit that he's getting for this. What else do we have to say?
The costuming I thought was good. The sets are good, but
200 sets were required, and they couldn't get Forbes Theater. So it's kind of funny that that was unavailable, so they had to recreate it.
It's an Apple TV series. It looks good, but really hanging into my cons, it's just the things that they expedited, the weird time jumps that they decided to add for no reason. They weren't in the book, and I think you could have just gone in chronological order like the book does. It would have been a lot better. The pacing is very slow. It's an hour for each episode, and so little happens when we actually get to Tobias' storyline. The exterior scenes at night in the first episode, it was really hard to see what was going on. I'm not sure if you got that, but when I was watching I could not understand it. And it's just a strange narrative choice to focus on Mary's backstory so much.
They say in the LA Times, I read this, they said there's more information out there about Booth's horse than Mary Sims. So when I read that, I was like, so why did you include so much of it? It's unless you're really trying to just pound a message in there, which it's a good message. It's just, it makes you feel like you're being treated like you're a dum-dum.
It's just, the changes to me and the people who got more screen time, Andrew Johnson definitely is not portrayed in a good light.
But you should have recognized Andrew Johnson. He's unrecognizable here, but you should have recognized him. He's the guy from 24 who would appear in every season with Jack Bauer, the Glenn Morshower person. He's like a character actor, kind of like a Margot Martindale. He's the one who would be like the security guy of the president, and then like he's bald. And then in this, I don't think he's bald, so that's part of the
like
reason.
I said, the makeup does a good job. Anthony Boyle, I think, kills that as John Wilkes Booth, but I really did not like the changes. I really could not get behind the pacing of it. Even the ending scene where we have Tobias in the first episode talking about how there might be a new civil war. I know that was a fear that was happening, but I just could not get into it. And it's that reason that I'm going to give this a 4.5 out of 10.
Not even average.
Not even average.
Despite everything they put into it. I think with the historical context and even with my cons, I'm still going to give this thing a 7 out of 10.
There were very little scenes where I actually was into it.
Yes, but you just read about it. So it's like you spoiled it.
But they started off with the assassination. I was like, okay, we're getting out of the way early. And even Lewis's Powell scene was somewhat intense. But just afterwards, it seemed like it just plummeted.
I did feel like in the first episode, they were able to accomplish more and it felt better. But both episodes were written by the show creator, Monica Beletsky. And so you can't really even make a comment about like, maybe they switched writers. Mm-hmm. Overall, Hollywood Reporter, USA Today, Collider, all liked it. The Guardian, Decider, AB Club called it a mixed bag. 2 historical, some of them said, 2 embellishing, others one said, and then 2 lumbering.
I agree with that.
But overall, it seemed like most places were accepting of it. So a 4.5 is very low, but I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that you are comparing it directly to the book.
And I really do like the book.
Oh, okay. So you're going to finish it?
Yeah, probably.
Is there anything that you expect to surprise you?
I don't know how Booth dies.
You don't know how Booth dies?
No. So that's how I want it. Because, whenever I took any history class, they never covered that part about it. It was always about Abraham Lincoln's assassination.
Cool. All right. Well, then 4.5 from you, 7 out of 10 from me. And the last thing I'll say is that it was really interesting. I remember a year ago, I found a YouTube clip that was from this guy named Samuel J. Seymour. He was the one who was being interviewed back in 1956. It was on a game show called I've Got a Secret. And he was actually the last survivor of the actual play, the My Cousin whatever.
How old was he when he died?
He was in his 90s. He died later that year in April.
Oh, wow.
So he lived for 2 more months after the interview, but he was like 5 years old and he actually had seen the assassination, I think. So it was cool to actually have someone who had been there visually and like you could hear their voice and everything. And just 1956 to now is almost the same amount of time as 1956 to then, right? Yeah. Thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode. Hope you enjoyed this one. Bye.
Bye.